Aloha, welcome everybody to this wonderful curated conversation with Quiet Before and the Shangri-La Museum of Islamic Art, Culture, and Design in Honolulu, Hawaii, and with our esteemed guest, Punahele, and soon to be joining us, Shah, who will be our guests on this panel. We're here talking about many different things, but with the focus on the idea of unearthing anti-Asian violence, what that means in a Hawaii context, what it means more broadly, and specifically how imperialism created this hierarchy of violence in Hawaii. So my name is Karima Daoudi, and I am the program coordinator, the public program and special events coordinator at the Shangri-La Museum. And I just want to kick it off by inviting our executive director, Dr. Conrad Ng, to sort of answer a few questions, because you may be thinking like, okay, Shangri-La Museum of Islamic Art, Culture, and Design in Honolulu, what does that have to do with unearthing anti-Asian violence? What does that have to do with this entire narrative? So just want to kind of toss it to you to start off with, Conrad. Where do we fit in all this? Why is this discussion relevant to us?
Well, aloha, everyone, and thank you, Karima. I mean, one of my great joys is to be able to be working with you, Karima, and Navid, and by extension, Punahele. I mean, you've been able to be part of our ohana is just so enriching, and we're grateful that you've been at the museum too a few times and shared your voice. So I think when, Shangri-La was invited to consider participating in Quiet Before, it was an opportunity for us as a museum to think about Asian Pacific American Heritage Month from a different perspective. This month has been part of the sort of cultural commemoration of the United States for a few decades. And it's an act by Congress, and usually it's an action by the president, in which the country may begin to understand its story from an Asian Pacific American heritage. And often that's discovering or recovering lost voices. I think that for us as a museum, our contribution to the commemorative month is to ask hard questions about how institutions and people have, have an opportunity to unravel power in very complex ways. And I think that's what is unique about talking about this month in Hawaii. That is the site of the Hawaiian Kingdom that has a diversity and heterogeneity of Asian Pacific American communities, and how the interactions that we have here are sometimes bound or narrowed by the types of power that that came into place after the overthrow of the kingdom. I feel Shangri-La, because we're in Hawaii, has an obligation to be able to host these conversations, to allow staff to have open conversations that we ordinarily maybe wouldn't be known to have because we're an Islamic art museum, or because people are curious about how Doris Duke had come to build Shangri-La in Honolulu, Hawaii. But when I first started, I thought this was an important question because we're named, Shangri-La, which is, based on a novel of this mythical place, which people can sometimes tie into this concept of Orientalism, this idea of an idealized existence that's full of, Asian people, right, who are ever youthful and ever present, ever peaceful. I think that doesn't fully capture, obviously, I think, as we come to realize, that doesn't fully capture the challenges and difficulties and complexities that Asian Pacific Americans have to contend with. And to think of Shangri-La in a very simple form, like the one in which I just articulated, I think really doesn't allow us to realize, a better model of existence, right? In which we're more inclusive, in which we can be more empathetic, in which we can allow and enable voices that are traditionally marginalized. So that's why I think it was important for Shangri-La to participate in this way. for Quiet Before and for this month, and to have the conversations that we are to have, which is to ask difficult questions. Which, I think when people think of Hawaii, they sometimes think of it as, tropical paradise, it's tourism, you have great weather all year round, but what do you have to be concerned about? And truthfully, as we'll hear, there's a lot. I mean, and there are good people who want to make this place better. And that's what, I think is really important for us to have this conversation and to provide our unique perspectives, like yours, Karima, and Navid, as co-workers, as colleagues, for us to have that kind of conversation. So thanks for allowing me to kind of frame it that way. I think it's just really important because you're right, people will wonder, why is Shangri-La hosting this conversation as part of this larger, great, awesome initiative? I think it's just really important during this month to really speak to power, to really speak to opportunity, and to highlight ways that we can sort of be better as citizens, as colleagues, as neighbors, as members of our community.
Yeah, I love that comparison of this idea of the name of our museum, Shangri-La, and this the way that people think about Hawaii as being this paradise, as being this exotic other place. Even in what it calls to mind for me too are sort of these like colonial postcards almost of hula girls and women of a harem and things like that. And this whole idea that this far off land and this far off place is just a kind of paradise with nothing to worry about. And so I guess I'll just throw that question out to the rest of the group. What do you, is there anything that resonates with you in that idea of what perhaps the damage that this vision of Hawaii as paradise has done, or the complex layers of what that means? Just open the floor there to either Puna or Navid.
It's a complex issue. And I know this is for like Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. But even though I'm like part Filipino and Chinese, I kind of don't identify as Asian because I have more of a kuleana to Hawaii, because I feel like communities and the Pacific, because communities like the Hawaiian community and the Micronesian community are, facing so much adversity. And yeah, I think, even it's a part of settler colonialism, and there's even Asian settler colonialism. And as a person of Hawaii, a Hawaiian, sometimes I feel marginalized by, Asians in power. Like when Harry Kim said that he wanted to trample on the soul of Hawaiians by building TMT on Mauna Kea, that was kind of hurtful. But it's also beautiful to build connections with peoples in Okinawa and stuff. And yeah, I'm just glad to be here. And I'm still like processing and working it out, but I'm always here to build solidarity instead of promote racism. And yeah.
We appreciate you, Puna. And sorry, we didn't really, I didn't really do an introduction for you. We just sort of jumped right in. Hopefully folks have seen your bio when they're tuning in, but Punahele is an amazing rapper, teacher, educator, activist from Makaha, the west side of Oahu. And hopefully after this, you'll be able to check out a lot of his music, and we're gonna ask him to even share some of his raps before the end of this conversation. So stay tuned for that. Navid, what do you think is the importance of being able to share these ideas through the arts? Because we're all here under the umbrella of being folks who work in arts and culture. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, thanks. Salam alaikum. My name is Navid Najafi. I'm the Learning Programs Coordinator at Shangri-La. That's a really important question, and I really appreciate everyone's perspectives. Thank you, Conrad, for setting the stage, and really well said, Punahele. It's a really complex issue, and there's a lot of nuance to what we're talking about, especially in Hawaii. You know, it's for people outside of Hawaii, unless you come and spend time here, you kind of get to know and learn the history of this place. There's a lot that people don't understand about Hawaii, and this concept of it being paradise, and kind of the postcard, the colonial postcard of what Hawaii is, to this day is still the majority of people's you know, perceptions of Hawaii. And I think that's been a kind of an intentional thing that's been done. You know, it's now in its current iteration is to promote tourism, you know, so a lot of negative images and negative stories that are perceived negative, that are actually true stories, don't really come out of Hawaii. And to speak to Puna's point, I mean, there's a lot of hierarchy within Hawaii amongst Asian American and Pacific Islanders. And it's kind of why I think it's important for us to have this conversation and represent, you know, this truth that we experience here, that Hawaiians have experienced here, Pacific Islanders and Asians have experienced, because it is all just a mechanism of imperialism and colonial violence. I'll get to your question. I'm not trying to avoid that, because
No,
that's,
I already know you have plenty to say. Keep going.
no, that's the crux of kind of what, you know, I do and what I seek to do. But you know, this mechanism that is kind of brought all of these people together in Hawaii, it's very much acute in Hawaii when you come here and when you experience it. The hierarchy is very real. And you know, globally, like for me, I was born in Iran, and through forced displacement because of war and violence, a lasting legacy of imperialism in Western Asia and North Africa, you know, my family and I were forced to leave. And so I was displaced from my homeland and became a settler in Hawaii. And the mechanisms by which I came to Hawaii were through settler imperialism, you know. So it's important to recognize the roles that we're all playing and the positions that we all assume, and to, you know, critically analyze that. And that's where the arts, for me, are most important. You know, as an institution, as a museum, we really just try to highlight and set a stage for artists to speak their truths. And for me as an artist and a musician, that's kind of what I've always, you know, that's been my goal from day one. And it's what connected Punahele and I and some of the other artists that we work with. You know, we have different styles, we come from different places, we have different stories, but we do share this one interest in speaking truth and being critical of not only our environment, but also ourselves, you know, critiquing your own position in life and your own path and being honest about it. I think it's really important, not just on a personal level, but to the community, you know. So art is really, I think, the most powerful way of doing that. You can engage people on several levels, you know, with music especially. Like we always talk about how music is a hook, right? So we just kind of throw the hook out there with beats that people can feel and rhythms and vibes that people enjoy. And then once we get them on that hook, then we can kind of speak some truth and create even uncomfortable situations. So music is definitely something that brings joy and laughter and pleasure and love, but it also can bring reflections of truth that could be uncomfortable. So the way we package our truth, the way that I try to package my truth, and I have a lot of, you know, trauma that I speak about and things that I speak about that maybe you don't feel like listening to, or you're just trying to hear a good song, you know, but we try to balance that. And like, you know, the hip hop icon KRS-One says it's edutainment, right? So it's education and entertainment all packaged into one. And honestly, for me, Punahele does that better than anyone, you know?
Yeah, as Bob Marley says, one good thing about music, when it hits, you feel no pain. And I feel like music is our tool to take a lot of critical and complex issues and even the trauma of our communities and selves and put it to a groove, and it can sift through the cracks and get to hard to reach places and touch people and have a paradigm shift and turn pilau into pono. And that's why we do what we do, to help people, to serve our communities, and to build solidarity.
So Conrad, how do you resonate with that, with this idea of arts as not just as bringing stories to the surface, but also as spaces of healing and joy, and particularly in your position as the executive director of an arts museum? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, it's terrific to hear, Navid and Puna and you too, Karima, to speak, be very real about the possibilities of art and artists to be, a moral compass for people, right? And especially for institutions. I mean, for Shangri-La, we've kind of had a long history of hosting artists in residence or in programs or through their exhibitions, because I think that museums in general are incomplete without artists, without inviting people and members of the community, whether it's in Hawaii or around the world, to be able to either speak truths or speak to power, truth to power, or also speak beauty and healing. I think that's what is resonating with me, is that as we begin to kind of try to realize and rebirth kind of a more inclusive society, or one in which is more pono, which is the idea of either justice or righteousness, a place to envision sort of a sense of futurisms. I think arts are central to that, and that's what's been driving at least our work at Shangri-La, and through Karima and Navid and other people, to be able to invite people on site to create a space and say, what do you see and feel? What can you create? How can this place inspire you to put into words or put into the world the kinds of hope or tragedies or traumas or injustices that many of us have experienced, or other people have experienced, or other people want to know more about? And I think that's really important. Right? It's not to kind of it's not to move it towards an act of blame, as opposed to opening a space, rather it's to open a space of healing. Once you name it, you can tame it. Once you can bring it into the world, people begin to understand. And I think that's really critical for a museum in general, but essentially, it is our essential work here at Shangri-La. And that's what draws me to the institution, right? And also to add that dimension to, what does it mean? What does Shangri-La mean? It's not this idyllic paradise. There are real textures of experience of communities represented either in the collection or in the community around us. And that's really important to include that in our heritage, right? In the museum's heritage.
Yeah, I love that you talked about that. So, I think part of what we discuss all the time at Shangri-La is sort of the hierarchy of where we as a museum are placed in Hawaii. And, the fact that we're a museum filled with art from thousands of miles away, from hundreds of years ago, that was the private home of Doris Duke, turned into a museum. And it's in a residential neighborhood, and it's kind of difficult to access for a number of reasons, although we're trying to get super creative about how to make it more accessible. But I think that it's important that we mention that in all of this. And specifically, I'd like to ask Punahele, like, you've been to Shangri-La a few times at this point, you've performed there. What has been your concept as somebody who's born and raised here from the other side of the island? What was your experience at Shangri-La, and how do you see sort of those layers, and how there are points of connection and also possibly ways that we can make ourselves more accessible in different ways? And just, I guess, what were some of your impressions being there?
Well, I come from like the super hood, and yeah, it's way completely different than what I've seen at Shangri-La, and it's beautiful, and it kind of like motivates me to have to inspire my community and even myself to kind of attain a place like that for our own homes and lives and stuff. And I also love how you guys interact and build community and make it accessible via shuttles or however you guys do it. It's amazing. And yeah, I like being there, and I like how you guys involve the community members like my brother Navid to cook and share his culture, and have people from all over the world have a space of healing at Shangri-La. And I think it's beautiful, and just keep up the good work. And I also liked when Conrad just said, once you can name it, or if you can name it, you can tame it. And it just makes me think of all of the problems going on in the world. I see, there's a lot of anti-Micronesian hate here in Hawaii. And I felt in 2019, there was a lot of like anti-Hawaiian hate and like pro-TMT rhetoric attacking Hawaiians, even in the Hawaiian community. And I just was super stubborn and took it upon myself to challenge members of my own community, my own close friends who was like super pro-TMT, and just tell them why. And of course, it was like some bitter moments. Like some of my friends, like I felt like they hated my guts. And I think once we like split apart and was away from each other, like we both processed what was said. And like two of the people that really like I felt like did not like me when everything was going on, when Kupunas was arrested, they came to Mauna Kea and they fought me like for months about the TMT issue. But after coming and seeing what was going on and seeing our community there, like uniting and, standing to protect the people of Oceania, it kind of made both of us grow and change their lives. And I feel like even at this moment, I'm kind of, having more pilikia, more problems, more dialogue with my own relatives because of like people promoting violence against Micronesians. Like, it's okay for this cop to shoot this kid down. He deserved it. Or, we should shoot Micronesians with pellet guns because they were shoplifting. Like, I feel like that anti-Micronesian hate is also what Hawaiians felt like, and I've seen Hawaiians feel my whole life. Like, those Hawaiians outside of Makua, they're squatters. In my head, like, they're people whose ancestors was living at Makua for generations. So just seeing how Micronesians are criminalized kind of pulls at my heartstrings, because I know how it is to be criminalized and, racial profiled and to deal with police violence. So I feel like by having dialogue, even if it's negative, it gives both people a chance to grow and a chance to heal. And I'm sorry for going on a completely different tangent, but yeah, Shangri-La is a healing space. And sometimes we got to get through, the negative dialogue and conversations to kind of heal and grow better on both sides of our issues.
For sure. Thank you. Don't apologize for going down these different roads at all. We really, really appreciate, your mana'o and everything. And I just wanted to, give some contextual reference for folks. And I will let you, Puna, since you spent the most time there, could you just explain a bit about what was happening on Mauna Kea and where it stands now, just for our viewers that may not be as familiar with what happened there?
So in 2015 and 2019, there were multiple kaheas calling out to the Hawaiian people to stand against the desecration of this 30-meter telescope, which is probably bigger than Aloha Stadium on Mauna Kea. And the reason that Hawaiians, care so much about Mauna Kea is because it is the most sacred piko, the most highest point of Oceania. And also, it is basically an aquifer. And it's easy, it's like the ohe, bamboo shoots. It's easy for things to leak down in that area and just pollute the whole water system and ecosystem of the Big Island. And yeah, we just care. It's our ancestor. My ancestors prayed there back in the day. And, we did not want no telescopes there to begin with. And now we feel like people are disrespecting our wishes. So we decided to go up there and stand toe-to-toe with police officers, with LRAD sound cannons, riot gear, mace, and all that, and just to protect the place that we love. And yeah, we're not anti-science, we're anti-desecration. And yeah, I spent the whole half of my year in 2019 on Mauna Kea, just standing with my people. And it was a beautiful sight to see Hawaiians uniting together to protect the Aina. And also, when I was standing toe to toe with police officers on Mauna Kea, Micronesian people was there supporting me as my bail support. You know, some of my relatives wouldn't even bail me out, but had Micronesian folks like, we got you, we'll hold your phone, we'll bail you out, and we'll take care of you if needed. And it's the reason why I'm so passionate about, you know, standing against anything that wants to harm the Micronesian community, because they was there for me and my people when we was in need. And not only on Mauna Kea, but there was a time where Hawaiians was just called lost savages that don't know nothing. You guys just stumbled upon Hawaii. And we needed help to prove that that's not true. You know, our people were navigators and we knew what we was doing. And we forgot that skill of ho'okele, navigation. So we asked for the help of Papa Maupiailu, of Satawa, of Micronesia. And he could have said, hell no. He could have, you know, kicked us away, shoo, you guys are already lost. But he decided to welcome us with open arms. And, you know, with his help, my people got to prove to the Western world that we're not just a bunch of lost savages. You know, we're people with a culture, a background, and an identity. And I'm super thankful for Papa Mau and the Micronesian community for standing in solidarity with us.
That's beautiful. And, you know, it's so important. Hopefully we're going to have Shad join us at some point. I know that, you know, she represents directly the Micronesian community. She's originally from Palau. And, you know, you speaking of protecting the land and the Aina and standing up for it, you know, she's actually in northern Minnesota right now with the Indigenous Environmental Network, participating in an action against Line 3, which is another pipeline that's being built on Indigenous land up there. So she was having kind of a hard time connecting, but, you know, we'll forgive her. You know, she's doing the righteous thing. We can always catch up later on. But I think that idea of this like divide and conquer, even among people who are literally cousins, you know, ties to me back into this notion of like Orientalism and painting everybody with the same stroke and othering people. And it's something that was created from, you know, an imperialist colonialist framework, and then just kind of got replicated all over the world, and then replicates itself. That's why it's such a dangerous, you know, seed to plant, because it does the work itself through the people who are suffering from it. And I just think that's super interesting, you know, just to share a little bit of personally, like my father's family is from Algeria in North Africa, and we were colonized by the French for 130 years, with hundreds of thousands of French and European people living on our land, renaming it, you know, treating Algerians as second-class citizens. So for myself, like you, Puna, like seeing those solidarity through lines in the ways that Algerian people were supported in their fight for independence by others, and then today to turn our back on that, to me is just unacceptable. And then also when moving to a land that I know is dealing with settler colonialism, meaning Hawaii, when I moved here, you know, it's a conscious effort to tread softly and learn and listen, and not to replicate, like I said, this same system that once the seed is planted just continues to replicate itself. And so I love that you're sharing about that. And I really hope to talk a bit more specifically about this anti-Micronesian hate and later on, and hopefully with Shah, but let's definitely revisit that, because it's something I think too that a lot of folks outside of Hawaii are just don't know much about, or are very confused about. And so I think that's super important, and it's directly tied to imperialism, militarization, and everything. So Conrad, is there anything else you'd like to add to the conversation? I know that pretty soon you have to Heleon, but we love your mana'o and everything you're adding. Is there something that stuck out to you that you'd like to piggyback on, or any questions you want to ask us?
No, I mean, thanks. I mean, I often, you know, appreciate these opportunities to listen and learn. I mean, it's, from basically my neighbors here in Hawaii. And a few things come to mind is that one of the things that occurred to me very quickly when you call Hawaii your home, right? You instantly acquire this sense of kuleana, right? Whether you realize it or call it or not, because it's part of being here. And for those people who don't know that term, and I will give my summary of it, but it's an obligation, responsibility of care, right? It's an ethic of care of a place, of a person, of an area, of a culture, of a people. And that's always informed kind of me in Hawaii. And that's the one thing I think Hawaii is actually pretty great at, is once you kind of recognize, your kuleana to this place, you recognize your privilege, you recognize, the ask, the call, to be part of the community, to serve the community, to see where it is, there are the pinch points, to see where there are the opportunities for joy, and to realize that. I find that Hawaii asks people to do it. It asks you to embrace its problems and as much as you embrace its beauty, and to solve them. And I think that's really central to being in Hawaii, is understanding your responsibility to the place, whether it's to be educated, whether it is to share the gifts that you have, to other people, to share space, to greet people with aloha. There's several ways in which one can exercise, the sense of kuleana. And I think that's part of why, it's important for Shangri-La to be part of this initiative, like Quiet Before, especially during Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. When there's a theme about, particularly now, unfortunately, this month, to explore anti-Asian violence, to sort of look at its seeds, its causes, its impact, its history, and its sort of contemporary dimensions. And I think that, part of our kuleana is allowing space, it's creating space for people to understand, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, and Hawaii itself as something a little different and unique, in having a richer understanding of, Asian Pacific America. So I'm always learning as we, do these from my, my neighbors, my community here, from Puna to Navid to you, Karima. But also, it always reminds me of that sense of kuleana and how that's something actually I think we get pretty right here in Hawaii, that you can walk down the street and you think, okay, actually, I think I'm responsible for picking up trash on the beach. Or actually, I think I'm responsible for, someone who doesn't have. Or someone might see that of me, right? That I have responsibility to greet this person with aloha, because maybe that will inspire him and his family to draw closer to understanding where I'm coming from. And that's something that, again, like I bring, that I learned very quickly about what makes Hawaii special, is this obligation to care for people and to care for community, to care for this place. And I think that's a stronger articulation of how we might be able to sort of resolve or address or recognize some of the institutions of power that have, taken power away from others, right? I think that's a real first step that I think Hawaii's, got right in that way. But yeah, unfortunately, those are my closing thoughts, because I do have to, again, I love this. I do have to hele, so which means I have to go. I have to kind of, get out. But I do want to express my gratitude to you, Puna, Navid, and Karima, and Shah, who will join And also to Nancy, who helped organize Quiet before. Just some real extraordinary efforts to put this initiative together. I think that our contribution is really important to it as a museum, but through the voices of the people that we've brought here. So just want to say my aloha and thanks.
Thanks so much, Conrad, for your contribution and for sharing with us and helping us make this happen. So talk to you later. Have a great day. All right. Now, I think to switch up the energy a little bit, Puna, would you spit something for us? Would you grace us with that?
What you want, acapella?
Whatever you're feeling, man. Acapella is good.
Okay. Sure. I am the voice of the streets, ascending through the fog, a product of the slums, young, brown, and pissed off. The cops arrest Hawaiians to serve private corporations. I'm here to protect the ghetto from the gentrification. My people don't want much, we just want self-determination. Don't join the military, learn kalo cultivation. I use my words as weapons against native dispossession. I'll gladly go to hell if there's no Hawaiians in heaven. Never said that I was perfect, but recognize that I ain't fake. I survived situations that made other people break. Kill them with aloha. I don't spread hate. Ho'i ho'i aina is the way to make Hawaii great and systemic oppression. No surrender, no retreat. They killed, I remember, and he could have been me. My people fill the prison, so I don't like the police. Arrest kupuna on the Mauna Kea, people run free, so it's FTP, ACAB, 4093, or I ride Route C. Not like these other rappers, they be lying on beats. The warden of the West is who I happen to be. Rah.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So I was taking Ethnic Studies 395 with Professor Rod Labrador, and I learned about performance of identity in immigrant and indigenous communities. And I learned about Honey Cocaine, who I don't agree with her rap style and her lyrical content. But what I learned was the reason she was saying all of this crazy, outlandish, bang, bang, thugged out stuff was because she did not feel comfortable identifying as a model minority. And that's because she felt like she shouldn't be subservient to a system that perpetuates white supremacy and treats people like her, terribly. And a lot of people just see these young kids like me, brown, dark, at risk, or Micronesian youth, and see us as just bad kids. But I feel like we're just responding to how we're treated, by society. I've been hearing from some friends that, education programs and extracurricular programs are being cut because the funding is cut in schools like Kalihi and Waianae. And I feel like these communities would be better off if, maybe less funding for the police to arrest kupuna on Mauna Kea was allocated for that and used to serve these communities and help build them up instead of, just promoting that these kids are just violent and attacking them. And yeah, I feel like no matter what I do, I'm working on my master's degree and I could still go to Whole Foods and somebody's going to stop me and be like, sir, can we check you? Or follow me around the store. Like no matter what I do. So sometimes it's like, I might as well embrace being, seen as, or even, performing my identity as something that is anti-model minority. And, why would I want to take a position of a subservient model minority when I could just be one rebel, aloha aina, who's gonna stand for my culture, my community, and come off as brash and, super strong from a position of my own power and truth, and, you know, protect people like me, communities like mine, or natural resources. And, you know, just, yeah, it's just taking my own positionality.
Yeah, especially when, you know, even people, and I think this is what's been talked a lot about in this Quiet Before series, is subscribing to the model minority myth won't save you in the end anyway. It won't. It's still part of the system that has been put in place, you know. So why try to be that one? At the end of the day, you'll get thrown under the bus just with like everybody else when it comes to, you know, in the case of, you know, a lot of Asian Americans, when it comes to the coronavirus, oh, now you're no longer a model minority, now you're, you know, this and this, that and that, you have a disease, or whatever the made up thing, the flavor of the year might be, you know. And I think for myself, and I don't know, Navid, please feel free to jump into this too, it's been so interesting being a child of, you know, 9/11 and having a dad who's Muslim, having a name that's, you know, identifiable for a particular group of people, and then having that racialization happen as I grow up. Basically, I was 14 when 9/11 happened, and I didn't even really like think about my dad's religion. I didn't think about the fact that he speaks Arabic or that he's Muslim before then. Like, it was just a thing. It wasn't like a political statement to be who I was, you know. And so I think it's really interesting, like, yeah, performing your identity, because you don't have any other choice. At least, you know, Black and brown folks in America, you don't have a choice about how you're perceived in the world, really. And so I really, and especially you tying that into like the police violence and stuff, it's like, I think that's super interesting, because like a lot of times when people are shot and killed, they don't know if you have a master's degree or if you're, you know, whatever the case may be. It's looking at a person and seeing how they, and responding to that racialization, right? I love that. Did you write that for your class?
Yeah, I did one of my classes, and the homie Sterling Higa made a song called Cobblestones, and I just was free writing it. And he's like, yo, I want you on this song. And I'm like, oh, it fits perfectly. So like I spit it, and me and Sterling have both like different backgrounds and identities and just thought processes and experiences. And, you know, that song kind of came together super beautifully, in my opinion, because it just shows the flip side of a coin that is people's experiences in Hawaii. Because he grew up, you know, as an Asian man, and I grew up as Asian man in Nuuanu, and I grew up as a young ghetto country Mokoayan from Makaha, and just shows both of our experiences on the same song, and it's super Maikai, awesome.
Navid, jump in, man. I know you got more to share.
Yeah, like we were saying earlier, I mean, Hawaii's position in these conversations is very unique. And AAPI, you know, when you're dealing with Hawaii, the Pacific Islander part of that. And it kind of ties into everything we've been talking about, because these definitions really don't do a very good job of representing people and regions. And even the term Micronesian, you know, it's kind of a made up term clustering a group of islands and different peoples and different cultures into this term. And then when you attach micro to it, I mean, that's kind of a you know, very subtle form of aggression, really, you know, like micro, smaller, obviously. And the history of Micronesians in Hawaii, and, you know, the displacement of Micronesians from their homes because of the US military's occupation and testing nuclear weapons, you know, for decades, and basically destroying the habitat and the environment of a lot of those places. And so, you know, people were forced to leave. And a part of US imperial aggression really is in that displacement. And people were given the opportunity to come to the United States, which, you know, we're in Hawaii, and there's, you know, issues as far as, is Hawaii a part of the United States? You know, in terms of international law, it's technically not. But because of military and aggression. I mean, we are on an island that's like the biggest military base in the world. And so, you know, the military causes destruction in one place and then brings people to another place and puts them in this situation where the hierarchy develops with other oppressed peoples, and oppressed peoples oppress other oppressed peoples, you know, and like what you were talking about, Karima, with 9/11. And, you know, I'm from Iran, your dad's from Algeria, you know, very different. You know, there are some cultural similarities and they share the same, you know, similar religion, but very different regions of the world. And so, but they're lumped together as Middle Eastern, right? They look at you, they look at me, we're both Middle Eastern. And that term Middle East is another one that's made up, you know, like Micronesia. I mean, the Middle East is a reference to the Middle East of the British Empire. So it's a term coined by the British Empire to describe a region of their empire, not an actual representation of a geographic location or a people or a culture. You know, there's so many different cultures that are lumped together under that term, just like Micronesia, you know, just like Polynesia and Pacific Islander.
And
So
even
yeah,
Melanesia, what that literally, you know that these things were named by colonizers. That literally means the melanated islands, and that's like a distinctively racializing categories. That makes absolutely no sense, as if these islands were separated from each other, you know, and they had those same distinctions. Like, oh, they're 2 shades lighter than us over at that island, so we don't mess with them. No, that's not how it works. And again, this is all connected back to this theory of, you know, Edward Said's Orientalism and painting everything with the same brush or in the way that it really suits the imperial, you know, agenda.
And then we adopt that, you know,
Yeah,
we as a peoples adopt that and label ourselves and turn against other oppressed peoples, you know, like 9/11. Like you said, it's the kind of like the flavor, the villain of the month kind of deal, you know, with the outbreak of the pandemic. You know, Asian Americans are facing extreme violence and judgment and being pinned as villains, where, you know, in Hawaii, Hawaiians have always been that. Micronesians have always been that, you know. There's countless examples of Hawaiians being oppressed and jailed and falsely arrested and accused and murdered just because of the color of their skin. You know, if you have darker Hawaiians, lighter Hawaiians, and this idea of a model minority has really been a major issue and a major kind of fracture point within these, you know, indigenous communities, minority communities, brown, Black communities, you know, and it's no different in Hawaii. And that's why when we were, you know, asked to participate in these discussions and being in Hawaii and being an institution of Islamic art, culture, and design, there are a lot of intersections with that. And being in Hawaii, we felt it was important to highlight, you know, Hawaiian voices and Micronesian voices specifically. And that's why we asked Shah to be a part of this panel. And it's really poetic, I think, that she's not able to join us right now because she's literally on the front lines in action, protecting native lands, you know, that are not her native lands, but she's there in solidarity, protecting native lands, exactly like what Punahele spoke about in terms of Mauna Kea. You know, when the assault on Mauna Kea and the attempt to build a 30-meter telescope happened, you know, Hawaiians are at the front lines, rightfully so, but there are other people, other indigenous people that recognize it in solidarity are there to support. And I think it's honestly beautiful that Shah can't make this conversation because she's on the front lines protecting indigenous lands on the continent. And the connections that indigenous peoples have around the world is a beautiful thing to celebrate. And I'm hoping that she can jump in because I feel like her voice is very important. We're talking about Micronesians,
sure.
But you know, I think it's awesome that she's out there.
We'll make sure one way or another to even if it doesn't happen today, we'll definitely find a way to have a separate time and bring her in, because we want to make sure her voice is here so we can accommodate for sure.
Yeah, she'll be represented for sure.
Most definitely. And so one thing so when we're going back to this topic of the idea of, you know, the horrible violence that happened in Atlanta with the murdering of mostly Asian women. And this idea, when I was here, I heard a lot of people say, and just to give a bit of context, I'm originally from Chicago. I've been here for almost 3 years, and so grateful to learn from the land and the people here, and eternally grateful and humbled in that. But it was bizarre to me to hear a lot of friends who identify as Asian say, oh, lucky we live in Hawaii. We don't have that here. We don't have this violence directed towards, Asian people here. We're the majority. It's a majority minority location. And that always was very strange to me, because in my mind, I'm like, how are you defining violence? Because a lot of times there's this frame of violence as just being these discrete and specific acts that happen between like individuals, and not like the quotidian sustained state violence or a violence of imperialism, where it's in history that the reason the US is here and stayed here was literally to have a base to be able to enact violence on Asia. So saying there's no anti-Asian violence in Hawaii is like, what? That's literally why America's here. Because of the advantageous location to get to Japan, Philippines, China, and also too, when we talk about the reason why Micronesians are here, and the COFA, the Compact of Free Association, that exchange is literally so that the US military can be closer to, can have outposts in Palau and Marshall Islands, things like that. And in exchange, there's this ability for people from the Federated States of Micronesia to come to the US to seek employment and different things like that, and healthcare to treat conditions that happened after all of the nuclear testing, which, just to give folks a little background who may not know about this, but there were between 1946 and 1958, the Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands, there are at least 7 nuclear test sites there that very much, contaminated the islands and people's health and environment there. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. And also specifically, Puna, I know that you grew up right next to Makua Valley, which is another site that was, that it still is part of the US military and was a testing site, not necessarily for nuclear weapons, but for other kinds of weapons. And so I just kind of want to put that out there of like, what are these definitions of violence? What are ways that you think that communities have experienced violence that aren't just this like, we hate you, one specific person, because of this one specific thing, even though that also happens, but sort of the bigger umbrellas of what that means. What do y'all think about all that? I know that's a lot to chew on, but
yeah, it's a lot. And just thinking about why Micronesians are here, as you mentioned, is because they were bombed, and I, referring to what was mentioned earlier, like Micronesia, Polynesia, none of that was made up by peoples of Oceania. And as the great scholar Epeli Hau'ofa says, in our eyes as people of Oceania, we do not see the largest body of water in the world as something that separates us. We see it as something that connects us. And, even before violence was enacted upon us, we was connected. And yeah, it just, as it makes me always kind of think about kids. Like I remember, like, would he have wanted to be here? Or would he have wanted to be, in his own homeland, probably farming kalo, fishing from the sea, just, doing things that I would want to do if Hawaii was deoccupied, taking care of my family. So yeah, and just, it hurts seeing seeing the Aina, like when I was a kid, just seeing Makua and all the valleys around it just burnt, like no native plants in sight, just burnt to a crisp, you know. It's kind of sad.
And again, to give a little context for people watching, I remember Saikap was 16-year-old, killed by the Honolulu Police Department, Micronesian, I think Chukis, yeah. And he was killed, was shot by the Honolulu Police Department, was supposedly a suspect in some crimes. But there's a lot of layers to it. And again, it's this idea of, to me, it connects back to this like violence, right? What is the violence we're talking about? Is it violence to live under an oppressive system? Was it violence for him and his family to have to come to Hawaii because of the situations in their homeland, whether it be the economic or the, you know, militarization or whatever? Is that part of the violence we're talking about? Or being ghettoized and criminalized? You know, this idea of criminalizing people, to me, it is violence to criminalize people. And then when those who have been criminalized act upon the situation that they've been put in, you know, then that's another form of harm for sure. You know, there are ways of, but then there are ways also of dealing with harm that's done. And this like carceral system of punishment and of, you know, it's basically like you take everything away, you criminalize people, and then when they do these criminal acts, quote unquote, then they're deemed as disposable. But they were already set up to be disposable, you know. That's how I kind of see it from a personal view. And so there's just so many layers there. And, you know, again, coming from Chicago, I was kind of like, what's the beef with the micro? Like, I didn't understand. I was like, what, did something happen that I don't know about? Like, was there like some big like issue between Hawaiians and Micronesians? Like, I did not understand, like, what's the beef? And with time, I've come to sort of understand that, yeah, it's this sort of like layers of colonization, layers of replicating the same system, scarcity mentality, that people are taking something from other people when really the ones who are taking it aren't even being looked at, you know. So yeah, now I'm kind of rambling, but those are sort of some of my thoughts on that.
No, that's beautiful. When growing up in Waianae, there was only like a small population of Micronesians, like maybe, you know, 2 to 3% of the people in my community were Micronesians. And it's kind of like I grew up playing with them and them being my friends, and I had no idea that there was just a bunch of, you know, hate inside of town. And just even the mentalities between where I'm from, the countryside, and town is different. And people tend to have more colonized perspectives, like I'm out for myself, which kind of promotes violence against Micronesians. And like you said, Micronesians are placed in situations that make them disposable. To me, it is violence to live in a communities like where I remember is from, to live in KPT, Cam 4, Palolo, Merirei, just packed in and being underfunded and under-maintained. It is violence just to be there. And like, I know I keep rambling on about him, but you know, me and Navid teach kids like him all the time, and I see him in a lot of my students. And I even got to teach him at Hale Ho'omalu while he was incarcerated. And people criminalize this kid, but I think kids like him is criminalized because people don't want to deal with them. They don't want to help them progress. They just want to throw them in this revolving door that makes money and, you know, leaves kids like this messed up, instead of providing programs and putting them in situations to help uplift them. And I am not a savior for Micronesians or a spokesperson for Micronesians. I'm just someone who's a relative that stands in solidarity with them because, yeah, we're from Oceania, and I know how it is to be treated the way that they're treated. And the reason that I'm not having this savior complex, because one, that's not my style. And two, is because I see hope in, you know, Micronesian people and their communities. And people always want to say, where's the elders? Nobody's watching these kids. There's communities, organizations like this, Seems Wonderful, that provides, you know, language training and job skills. And it's all ran by Micronesian, like, elder women, Micronesian Punahele. And they've taught like thousands of people, you know, how to get into the workforce, how to sew, how to have a trade, and just build community like that. And also organizations like K-Vibe, Kalihi Valley Bike Exchange, you know, they give kids tools to build their own bike, you know, have a space to interact socially. And they even serve the community. They clean up Joseph Kahahavai's grave area. And he was a Hawaiian that was killed, you know, back in the day in the Massey trial. And just seeing how much they do for themselves, I know that they're going to rise above this, no matter how much the racist voices of Hawaiians and non-Hawaiians attack them on pages like Stolen Stuff Hawaii. I know that they're going to rise above this, but it's sad that we got to see kids like him get shot down.
Yeah, I think a big key to that situation too is he was a kid. He was a child, you know, and so many kids make bad decisions, but they're afforded second chances, third chances. You know, we know people who are in great positions in life now, who are doing amazing things and helping their community, that at one point were kids caught up in the criminal justice system, you know, and for whatever reason, they were given opportunities to right their wrongs, you know. And what's really, really just sad and you know, there's the lack of empathy for this child because of labels like criminal, Micronesian, whatever it might be. You know, it's happened, like you mentioned, the Massey trial. You know, people should look that up. A case in Hawaii where a Native Hawaiian was falsely accused and put on trial and killed because he was Hawaiian, because of the color of his skin, because of his position in society. And what people fail to realize a lot of times is the empathy that's required to you know, help kids especially navigate these hierarchies that we're talking about, you know, navigate this reality where they're automatically labeled criminals, you know, and being houseless puts you in a position where you have to turn often to crime, or what's perceived as crime, just to feed yourself and your family. While major criminals, you know, financial criminals on a much higher scale, they get away with things, you know. It's the system, and that is inherently violent in itself. We focus on the kid that, you know, steals a bike over you know, Honolulu Rapid Rail Authority CEO who embezzles millions of dollars, and then just the only penalty is he loses his job and goes and gets another consulting job for millions of dollars elsewhere. You know, who is the real criminal in these conversations? But a lot of times oppressed peoples, because of the trauma and oppression that they've faced themselves, become hardened to that and lash out at other oppressed peoples that they perceive to be below them or threatening their position in the hierarchy somehow. And they become the most vocal, you know, opposition to the progression of other oppressed peoples. And we see it all around the world. You know, Hawaii is definitely not unique in that sense, but the particular mix that we have here in the brew and the history of this place is very unique. And I'm really honored that we're talking about this, and we have someone like you, Punahele, to represent and to speak about it. And we'll have conversations with other people too that can speak about it. But they're important discussions to have for sure. And especially in this context of the AAPI Heritage Month, it's important to dive into these nuances that oftentimes gets overlooked in these conversations.
Yeah, most definitely. I wanted to open it up to you guys. Are there any like questions you want to ask of each other, or things that you've sort of thought of throughout this time? or of me, you know, any, just opening the floor. So I don't always have to be the one asking questions.
Yeah, no, I want to kind of ask you the same thing and the similar questions that you kind of asked us, you know, about particularly the one you asked me about art and creativity, and then the work that you do, you know, creating programming around art exhibitions and working with artists to present their work. What do you see as the critical element of what you do, and why is it important to put together programming, and what is your thought process when you're putting together programming?
Yeah, most definitely. So I was actually thinking about this a few minutes ago when you talked about empathy, right? For me, the reason that I love working in the arts is because I feel like it's one of the few ways that you can actually transmit the way it feels to live in somebody else's world in an emotional way that builds that empathy, whether it's a film. I remember some of the most influential books that I read, novels, like as a youth, you know, a lot of like Black novelists, just understand, like feeling those feelings through art that I would never be able to feel just walking around in my own body and my own skin in this world because of who I am. And to me, those bridging of worlds through that spark of empathy, that pulling on the heartstrings, that emotion, also joy. You know, art can be something that's sort of like a difficult, it can be difficult conversations, it can be thought-provoking, it can also be joyful. And I think all of those things are super important. And you know, it has been hard during COVID to not have those spaces to connect with people and have those cathartic moments that these events also provide. But you know, it's needed, and hopefully we'll get back to that soon. But conversations like this have been really helpful as well. But I think that for me, that the community building that happens around sharing artistic practices or events or spaces for people to come together and connect is really important and beautiful. And that's sort of like the emotional footprint that lasts with people over long periods of time, rather than, you know, maybe hearing something in a classroom or reading, you know, something in an article, but it's having that emotion involved. And so, you know, in wanting to create programming specifically for Shangri-La in Hawaii, you know, I found it so important to say, like, the people and the cultures represented by our collection are not foreign to Hawaii at all. And there are ways to make these connections, to bridge these traditions, to dig into the histories between these countries pre-Western contact. Like, you know, you and I were just at the State Archives last week looking into the relationship between the Hawaiian Kingdom pre-overthrow and the Persian, you know, Kingdom of Persia. That existed already before any kind of European influence on the governments. And so being able to dig up those stories and show that there are all of these narratives that, you know, things have been sectioned and segmented for so long because of concepts like Orientalism, like white supremacy, like segmenting, like what we were talking about, Micronesia, Middle East, Melanesia, you know, all of these different things. They are social constructs, so they do have real life, you know, real life influence on our experiences. However, they are made up, so we can also dismantle them, you know, and being able to pull apart those layers through arts, I think is just really special and impactful. And that's part of why I love it so much. So being able to interface with folks like you, and, you know, we didn't even mention this yet, but in addition to Navid being our learning programs coordinator, he's also a dope MC, ill nomadic. And that's how we all know Puna, actually, because when Navid performed at Shangri-La before starting to work with us, Punahele was one of our guest rappers. So, you know, I don't know if at some point you want to also maybe spit something, Navid. That's an option. I'm just putting it out there, but no pressure. But yeah, anyway, connecting communities through the arts is beautiful. I love it. I think it's super impactful. And always trying to, again, make space for the voices that are oftentimes not represented, and not be the savior like Puna was saying, but just like move over and give the mic to somebody, I think is just so valuable. And I love being able to do that here in new ways. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, no, and you do an amazing job of it. Very, you're always so thoughtful and reflective. And like you said, you know, you came to Hawaii 3 years ago, and you know, you really took the time to learn and immerse yourself in the community and to listen. And I think the programming that, you know, you can create is more potent and more powerful because of the perspective that you bring and your humility that you bring to it. So, I mean, it's an honor for me to work with you. And like you said, before I started working here, I actually performed a few times, and Punahele and myself have done, you know, a lot of songs together and worked together over the years. And like Punahele was saying, we've, you know, taught kids and done workshops. And we talk about the power of creativity and the power to be able to tell your own story. And what you were talking about, actually, the connection between the Hawaiian kingdom and the Persian kingdom, which is called Iran now. You know, we discovered diplomatic relations existed, you know, 150 years ago. So in the 1870s, 1880s, diplomatic relations were established between Hawaii and Iran, and royal orders were exchanged. And so Punahele and I actually wrote a song about that. And it was on my last album. The song is called Non-European Powers in the Age of Imperialism. One of the longest song titles I've ever put together. But, and we got to perform that at Shangri-La, you know, surrounded by these works of art from Iran in Hawaii. So it's like the context, the story, everything really just aligned and came together to be able to highlight those relationships. And it's really important because a lot of times, I mean, our education system in America especially is very Eurocentric, you know, so we see things from the perspective of Europe, and like the terminology that we were talking about, the Middle East, Micronesia, these are Eurocentric terms. And so to be able to tell a story outside of that sphere and to connect people outside of that realm and to highlight these connections that, you know, we oftentimes don't learn about. You know, like people come to Hawaii, they don't realize that Hawaii was a sovereign country that had treaties with, you know, over 100 different countries around the world. So this history is important, and getting to create music and art around these stories is really important too. And maybe I'll share something a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot that we should have queued up that song. We'll make sure that we link it in whenever, however this is presented later. That's so amazing. What a coming together to have been able to present that at Shangri-La, you know. Do any of you have any organizations or people or folks that you want to shout out doing good work regarding all of these different issues that we're talking about here on Oahu or on the other islands? This is this time for shout outs. And so people can learn more.
I'd like to shout out Sound Shop, which is a program that Navid created that reaches out and teaches kids from at-risk backgrounds the power of songwriting, lyric writing, beat production, and poetry. And I wish I had a program like Sound Shop when I was a kid to kind of, you know, I remember Psycap, man. I was riding in stolen cars and robbing people and breaking into houses, which, like, I didn't think I was bad. I still don't think I was a bad kid. It's just my environment. Everybody was doing that. I feel like I was a normal kid, but I'm kind of glad that I found music myself, but I would have probably not gotten into all of the negative things that I did if there was programs like Sound Shop in my school in YNI growing up. So yeah, I just like to shout out Sound Shop and the Kanaka Rangers on the Big Island for reforesting native plants all over and just teaching people how to plant native plants. So shout out to those brothers.
It's beautiful. Got any for us, Navid?
There's a lot of people doing really good work in Hawaii, especially in the Native Hawaiian community and the what is termed the Native Hawaiian Renaissance of the 1970s and reclaiming of Native Hawaiian culture. It really coincided with this global movement of young people around the world reclaiming their indigenous cultures and reclaiming their sovereignty from Africa to South America, all around the world. And it just so happens that it was also the same time that hip hop culture and hip hop was created and invented by Black and brown kids in New York. And it's always this a negative environment oftentimes blossoms and blooms the most beautiful transformations, and a positive is built out of a negative that transforms people's lives and the community. So in Hawaii, it's been an ongoing process, and with the uprising in Mauna Kea and the organizations that came together to support Mauna Kea and to fight the desecration of Mauna Kea, it's like what it's called, like the next wave of Native Hawaiian Renaissance, basically, that's happening. And it's in terms of education, I think it's where it's really, really blossoming. And like Punahele, I'll let you speak about it in terms of what you're doing in school, but the reestablishment of indigenous wisdom and teaching, outside of the realm of the Western perspective, and Native Hawaiian charter schools that have been established and perpetuated. Halal Kumana is a school that we have worked with before. And there's just a lot of people doing amazing work and reclaiming what it means to tell your own story and to represent who you are. So I'll let you talk about that real quick, Puna. I think it's important, the realm of education that you're in.
So I'm an ethnic studies major, and I'm working to get my master's in education administration. And all I want to do is, learn Hawaiian language and teach Hawaiian language in my community and teach songwriting to anyone who wants to learn. But yeah, schools like Halal Kumana, Punahele, Leo, and a lot of like the Hawaiian language and immersion schools are super beautiful. It's kind of amazing to see babies who are preschool who can speak better Olelo than I can as a 300 level Hawaiian language student. And I know that, as my people say, Ika Olelo no Keola, Ika Olelo no Kamake. In language, there is life, and in language, there is death. And, these kids are speaking life and just, by learning the language, they're also absorbing the practices of our ancestors and are able to access it via the newspaper, because Hawaiians wrote everything down in the newspaper. And, to better serve our families, heal our communities, and just nui ko'u aloha no kela mau kula. Like, big love to all of the people engaged in those efforts.
What's up? Yeah, it's been such a joy to learn about all these different institutions and individuals doing this amazing work, and to have been here right, when the movement to protect Mauna Kea was starting. It was just, I feel so grateful to have been in Hawaii when that was really ramping up to the level that it was at, and just learning and listening so much. I know there's also a couple of other organizations like We Are Oceania that is specifically, centralizing, supporting a support system for Micronesian communities and families in Hawaii. So they're a great organization that's doing work in that way. And there's also generally the Hawaii People's Fund is like a granting organization that funds many, many amazing grassroots projects. They give out sort of mid-sized grants to all kinds of amazing grantees. And so you can see a list of tons of organizations that have been funded by them over time. Much respect to the work that they do. I also love Malama Makua, which is a Kanaka Maoli-led, Native Hawaiian-led nonprofit organization that has a mission to bring about the return of the sacred Makua Valley from the US military for a culturally appropriate use. So that is, I've been able to go on one of their tours, where basically it is once a month you can go on cultural access tours there. But because there are still live, shells and things like that, I don't know the proper terminology for them, but it was used as a target practice valley basically, and it's among the most sacred valleys on all of Oahu. And now you can go there and see the amazing petroglyphs that are in the back of the valley and learn about the mo'or, the kind of like lizard deities that were said to be in that realm, in that area. But you need somebody who walks like 20 feet in front of you to make sure nothing's going to explode as you're walking through the valley. So, this is the reality of a lot of the spaces out here. It's like, go see these amazing ancient petroglyphs, but be careful because you might trip on an explosive that was left there by the military. So that's an amazing organization as well. And then there's a lot of really great anti-nuclear work that's being done here and in the Pacific as well. Like there's Hawaii Peace and Justice that does a lot of like demilitarization projects, and like Veterans for Peace are involved. And also there's like Choices, non-military alternatives for youth, because again, a big part of the military is sort of tapping into a lot of youth who may feel like they don't have other choices after high school, and then just continuing that cycle of this imperial way that America is in Hawaii. So there are tons and tons of amazing, Hawaii is small, but is so powerful in the world of activism, in the world of peace and justice and demilitarization and anti-nuclear projects in the Pacific. It's really beautiful to witness and to learn from. So I think I just want to ask one last question, because we talk about so much of, the trauma that has bound us all together, the colonization, all of these kind of negative things that have connected us, and the really heavy stuff that we're dealing with. But I just want to ask you all, because you're creatives, like, what do you see what is your abundant vision of the future of Hawaii and the world? Like, what do you imagine for this place where we all live, that can go any kind of direction? What would it look like if Hawaii was demilitarized, or if it was sovereign, or if it was, let your mind go wild. I know you all have thought about it before, so please share. What kind of Hawaii do you want to live in, or do you want to see your kids and grandkids live in?
I'll let you go first, Puna. I feel like you should answer that.
Ooh. A nuclear-free Pacific, no more bombing in Hawaii, no more live fire training. Who knows? A huge decrease in tourism, a huge increase of funding for education and programs that serve community, and kapu aloha training for police. I want Olelo Hawaii to be the first language of Hawaii. Everybody should have to learn Olelo Hawaii. And even in all the courtrooms, all the systems, I want Olelo Hawaii to be the first language, which it is technically supposed to be, but I want Olelo Hawaii spoken by everyone in Hawaii. And I don't want Aina harmed. I don't want no GMOs. I don't want no pesticides sprayed. Basically, I just want to take care of my kids and make more kids and have grandkids and watch them do amazing things and be amazing as they already are, even though they're not here. You don't want me to, I'm going to go in. I want Guahan to be free, Okinawa to be free, Palestine to be free, Turtle Island to be free. No more desecration on sacred lands. Line 3 stopped. Just all over, man. Everybody. Ihumatao, like not desecrated. Kutiki, not desecrated. I could go on forever. And just, I have choke love for my indigenous people. I'm not like, super hateful towards colonizers. I just want people to be treated with dignity, respect, and, like the golden rule, to be treated how other people want to be treated. Maybe a little more empathy. I don't want to see Micronesian kids getting shot down. I want to see more justice for, like, for everyone. I want people to know and feel and acknowledge and implement the fact that Black lives do matter. And, I just super love all around. And if not, I want people to stand up to make those things to happen. And eventually, I noticed, like, all wicked things fall, no matter what people say. The colonization of my people, like, eventually, like, America is gonna fall. And anything that is wicked, I want to fall. And I want something better to grow. But that's my wish.
Oh, thank you.
That's why I wanted Punahele to go first, because I knew beautiful vision. And honestly, as an artist, what I really love about the work that you do is that you talk about solutions. You paint this picture, you envision a future that is brighter and more just. And so it's not just talking about the problems of the present, it's really projecting into the future. And I love that. And then for my perspective, I'm going to share a little rap that that Punahele asked me to write a couple of years ago for one of his albums when he was on Mauna Kea. And I, went there a few times, and he just wanted me to kind of talk about my perspective of that place. But I think it talks about kind of the vision for the future also at the very end. It's short, so it goes, from an early age, they taught us all to be afraid. Subjugation system used to synthesize slaves. Be brave in the face of tyranny and hold the flame. Illuminate the road that your ancestors paved. Walk it with your head up. Be confident, don't let up. You're bound to face resistance. If you fall, you better get up and stand when the moment calls. Ground yourself in dignity. Demand the truth from those who oppose your right to sovereignty. The irony, Hawaii occupied by Lady Liberty. She holds that torch high, shining light on the hypocrisy. The life of the oppressor is filled with inner darkness. The wrong side of history. They desecrate, not progress. They're making bad choices and the future looks grim, but the essence of this planet is pure, so let it in. Align yourself with nature, knowing she will always win. Give more than you take. Let the healing begin.
Hey.
Yes.
Amazing. So thank you both for your visions through your art and everything, and sharing, your vision for the future for Hawaii. And, for me, it's really just like this model of abundance. Like we have all we need in the land and in each other, and just sort of like getting out of these systems we think we're stuck in, and that's the only way things can ever be. Understanding from our history that they weren't always like that, so that means that they don't have to always be like that. And really understanding, taking these through lines of things that have happened to our peoples that are maybe not the most positive, but then turning that into, okay, where are these connections that are not just living in the trauma, but that are just connections of our own humanities, which have much more in common than any kind of trauma that connects us. And just really, individually, institutionally, community-wise, healing from these cycles of trauma and intergenerational cycles. And I think people really are starting to do that in a lot of ways. More light is being shed on histories that have happened, and more discussions are being had, and more people are reclaiming the positive sides of their pasts. And so I just hope to see that kind of beautiful abundance and the ability to really be in line with nature and be in line with the life all around us, whether that be human or otherwise. And to bring balance back in the world, because things have gotten out of balance, but we can do it. And especially with people like you all on board. So I just wanted to say a big thank you, big mahalo nui to you both, and to Conrad and to Shah also, who we will definitely get in the mix at some point. And it was such a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak with you both and hear your visions, hear your thoughts on this complicated place that's has all the beauty and all of the complexities that are important to share with the rest of the world. So thank you so much. Thank you, Quiet Before. Thank you, Nancy. We really appreciate your support on this. And yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys. And thank you, Karima, for leading the discussion and everything that you do. Appreciate you.
Mahalo nui ya oko. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Hi, salam, aloha, everybody. This is Karima Daoudi, and this is part 2 of a conversation we started with Quiet Before and Shangri-La Museum of Islamic Art, Culture, and Design that we started a few months back during Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we're revisiting now with our esteemed guest, who I will let introduce herself in just a moment. And we're continuing the conversation, basically looking at this idea of imperialism and hierarchy, of a racial hierarchy of violence in Hawaii, and how those things are connected. And we're tying it back to this initial seed idea of unearthing this idea of anti-Asian hate in the States, in the United States, and in everywhere that the United States has touched or occupies, and what that looks like, and what is sort of the mix of perspectives and the different layers to peel back to really understand, what this means. What is anti-Asian violence mean on a small scale, on a large scale, on a and all of the different interpersonal ways, and on the sort of higher level imperial state violence as well. And how does it show up differently in different places, depending on the particular histories that are happening and that have happened in those places. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background so we can kind of jump into some of this conversation. And I would just like to ask Shah to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you do. And I would love for you to explain a little bit about the hashtag that you created as well, to give us some grounding.
All right. My name is Shah Ongelungel. I work as the media coordinator for the Indigenous Environmental Network, and I also do outside advocacy and activist work rooted in Pacifica. A lot of the work now has been around anti-Micronesian sentiment in Hawaii, anti-Micronesian discrimination. I believe it was in 2018. I went on Twitter in my feelings after seeing some stuff on Facebook and started a hashtag. And it was hashtag being Micronesian. And I have this habit of keeping screenshots of things that I think are interesting or things I think are strange or just things that catch my attention. And so over the years, I collected a pretty good amount of anti-Micronesian screenshots in the comment sections of news articles, whether it was good news or bad news, but it was always a lot of really hateful things. And so over the course of maybe a week or so, I made this thread and just started posting everything. And I didn't redact any information. These were all public posts. I didn't redact anything. And part of the reasoning behind that was that it was about holding individuals accountable versus holding entire communities accountable. Because there were Native Hawaiians, there were Japanese Americans. There were people from all different backgrounds, and it wasn't about holding their whole communities accountable. It was this person said this thing, and so we would hold that person accountable. And I wanted that same thing to apply to Micronesians as a community. And so it got picked up by Civil Beat, then got picked up by The Guardian and Al Jazeera News, and it just kind of, it was like its own little buzz for a bit there, but I guess unintentionally, it opened up some dialogue, and it's just kind of, it has a life of its own now. I'm just the person who like posted on Twitter because I was in my feelings and hungry, and now it's this thing. So that's pretty much the work I've done.
That's special. You never know, in a moment of tapping into feelings, like what that will do for other people who are feeling similarly and who want to be able to express that. And so, this is something that, I mentioned this in the last recording, but I moved here from Chicago about 3 years ago. And I really did not understand sort of the context for like, what was the beef between like I was like, did I miss something that happened? What is happening here as far as the dynamic particularly with Micronesian immigrants and migrants in Hawaii? And I'm wondering if you might be able to give just a little bit of context to other viewers who may be a little bit just like not know what's happening on the ground, and why even that hashtag was relevant, or why it might, why it was an important thing to bring to the surface.
Absolutely. So the backstory for all of this is that I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. And in the 1980s, growing up here, Oregon being a very notoriously white state, founded as a whites only state, the Pacific Islander community here was very small. And so I don't know if united was necessarily the word to use, but it was just, those beefs didn't exist. It was normal for different island groups to interact. And I went to Hawaii for college in 2001, assuming that that was just how it would be. And it was the first time I'd actually ever really kind of interacted with my own community outside of our bubble in the Pacific Northwest. And so on two fronts, it was very difficult. I'm Palauan American, and I'm very much acknowledged as a Palauan American. And then learning that don't tell people you're Micronesian was like a piece of advice that relatives kept giving me. And I found that pretty horrifying. I mean, to the point where I left before my freshman year of college was done, and I didn't go back to Hawaii for over a decade. And so the first thing my cousins told me when I lived there was, if you apply for this job, I think I was applying somewhere, like some bookstore, they said, if they ask where you're from, tell them you're from Oregon, you're an American. If they press it beyond that, say you're Palauan, do not tell them you're Micronesian, because then you won't get hired. I didn't get that. They were explaining to me that Micronesians had a bad reputation and that you just don't want to be known as one. And I'm like, but we are. And so that was horrifying. I left. I came back just assuming that in the course of 15 years or so, maybe things should have gotten a little better, and discovered it was worse. And so the way I usually tell people about it is everything you think you know about race relations and like socioeconomics behind race on the continental United States, do not apply that to when you go to Hawaii, because it is completely different. And yes, there are hierarchies for different races, and not even just race, but it's based on like how long you've been there generationally. Are you from this ethnic group? Are you local? Have you been there for a while? Or are you a new immigrant? And at the bottom of that hierarchy is Micronesians, which people just say is because, oh, you're the most recent immigrants, but there are records that show that's not necessarily the case. I have my own theories on it. But the hashtag and the screenshots that go with it include things, and it's very common, excuse me, you would see people saying like, oh, the cockroaches are out, because that is what they refer to Micronesians as, and take out a bottle of Raid, excuse me, were going hunting for Micronesians, purge the Micronesians, deport them all, kill them all. It goes from like just really petty little things to actually inciting violence. And it's that whole span. And having moved back to Hawaii with so many years in between the times I'd lived there, it was really, some days it felt disheartening, some days it was just horrifying. And to see that instead of progress, it had gotten so much worse. It had become a systemic thing. I think it's the Hawaii State Board, like Civil Rights Commission, U.S. Civil Rights Commission, they put out a report that was titled Micronesians' Obstacles to Equal Opportunity. And it looks over things like obstacles to employment, housing, medical care, even education. We've heard stories of kids who are in school and they hear their teachers say like, oh, the only reason these kids come here is for free lunch. And there's so many things like that. There are patients who die for lack of language access, or for doctors not even really caring because, it's those Micronesians. And employment and housing, it's just having worked as an advocate and doing, it was some legal advocacy and different kinds of advocacy work for the Micronesian community. The things that you would see is just mind-boggling because you can't do that to people. Like, you can't do it ethically, you can't do it morally, and you can't do it legally, but it still keeps happening. And that was kind of the foundation to the hashtag, and me just being kind of like, I'm just going to go ahead and post these now. I'm tired, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm hungry. These are going online. I don't care.
Wow, that's heavy. Thank you for sharing, and I'm so sorry that you've had to experience those things along with your community, and thank you for, talking about things that are difficult and hurtful with us. We really appreciate your vulnerability and your realness. I want to sort of tie this back to the main theme, right? We're looking at unearthing anti-Asian violence during, it's now a couple months later, but during specifically Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And something that kind of was interesting to me, again, moving here from elsewhere, was a lot of friends here who identify as Asian American or Asian Hawaiian would say, oh, so lucky we live in Hawaii. We don't have that kind of violence here, in reference to the horrible attack that happened in Atlanta, killing, all of or mostly Asian women, which was horrible and hurtful and really, really shook many people. But I always found that comment really interesting because I feel like the definition of violence varies. And to me, seeing sort of an everyday and imperial violence that happens because of America's occupation of Hawaii is the big violence, you know what I mean? Even if perhaps there are some other layers of interpersonal violence that may look different here. And so I just kind of want to connect that back to this general theme of, how do we unearth this anti-Asian violence, which in my mind extends to the Asian continent and the Pacific Islands and everything like that, because they cannot be removed in my mind, they cannot be separated. And so do you have any thoughts on that, of how there's this idea that, oh, lucky we live in Hawaii, we don't experience this thing, but how does everything you've been talking about in your mind connect to this bigger picture of imperial violence? And if you would like to connect that back to what you've been doing lately on other Indigenous land as a water protector, we would love to hear about that as well.
I think, and this is one of the things that I talk about a lot, compensatory domination, which in Hawaii, more people probably know as plantation mentality. And that's like, I've done TikToks about this and trying to explain it to people, because this is a really big deal, especially in a community like in Hawaii, or places where there are lots of different marginalized groups. But the idea that like the powers that be, the colonizer, the oppressor, they don't necessarily have to do the heavy lifting on their own. in places like Hawaii, where there is that history of the plantation and the different groups and how they relate. And people get mad at me for saying this, but their proximity to whiteness, proximity to power, proximity to those things, people will do lots of horrible things to hold on to that. And not understanding that that proximity to power, proximity to whiteness is not the same thing as having power. You're still essentially a puppet for those powers that be. But when that's kind of all you have, then you'll oppress the next person down. And so I had likened it to like a Russian nesting doll, where the doll on the outside is the biggest and it's right next to the doll maker. So that proximity, it's like the closest, but then it oppresses everything inside it. And you go to the smaller and smaller and smaller and smallest doll, and you get to the smallest doll in the very middle, and it has nothing left, but every layer outside of it is trying to hold it down and oppress it. And in our case, that would be the Micronesians. And I feel like in order to really understand these things, you have to understand the history of the places to put it in that context, because it does apply on Turtle Island, on the continental United States, but in different ways. And so I know some islanders also refer to it as like crab bucket mentality. Like, you don't want to see those people do better, so you'll pull them down. But that's when I think of violence that's rooted in colonization, militarization, imperialism, that's what I think of, is that they've gotten to the point where the oppressing power doesn't necessarily have to do the heavy lifting, because they have like their favorite child, and the favorite child will do anything to keep that attention, and in turn, the next favorite child and the next favorite child. And that's what that is, at least for me, looking at it. And so that is the basis of a lot of my work, is not just talking to people outside of these communities, but like trying to get people to connect. Because when you understand that essentially all these things we face are the same, they're different battles, but they're on the same front. We're fighting the same thing. We just don't always connect. And so in order for us to move forward, we have to make those connections. We have to understand each other as like the global majority, the global indigenous populations, and we have these things in common. We have a common enemy, and that's what gives us strength. And it is one of the things that I try to talk about in my work with the water protectors, in talking to my own community and letting people know in Pacifica what's happening in Line 3 directly impacts us, because they're fighting oil pipelines that are destroying their land, destroying everything that is theirs. But that oil, that's not oil that stays here. That's oil that goes out towards the Pacific, whether it's China, and also when it comes to that, so when we're looking at who is the largest consumer of fossil fuel in the world, the largest protector of fossil fuel in the world, that's the Department of Defense in the United States of America. Who is militarizing all these islands? Who is putting all of these smaller places that don't necessarily matter to them in jeopardy? If we stop that, then we're slowing down and eventually stopping something else. And that's why making these connections has been really important to me in the work I do, whether it's my day-to-day job or my outside activism and advocacy work.
I love that. And I two things you mentioned that stood out to me. It's like this crab bucket mentality, which many people have heard a lot. And then I just saw something recently where someone was like, yeah, but crabs aren't supposed to live in the bucket. So, like that the whole way of looking at it shifts when you realize, oh yeah, crabs don't live in buckets. Naturally, they don't pull each other down. You know what I mean? They're supposed to be playing in the rocks and,
so much this.
So like just shifting that one way of looking at it is like, what is the bucket? What is the vessel in which we are all living that creates this dynamic and this sort of just this system that you mentioned that does the work for itself. And I'm so glad you mentioned that too, because we talked about it a lot with Punahele, where it's like, once that seed is planted, it replicates itself without any work on the part of the people who are sitting back and, and reaping the benefits. it replicates itself. And that's one of the reasons it's so dangerous, and one of the reasons why it needs to be interrupted. And these connections of solidarity need to be made. And so I'm so glad you're talking about that. And so, just kind of bringing back in a little bit of the perspective from Shangri-La and like why we thought this was really important to do. We're a museum of Islamic art, culture, and design in Honolulu, right? What does this have to do with unearthing anti-Asian hate and violence? And for us, it's like, especially myself and Navid, coming from cultures that have also been racialized, especially post 9/11, we understand what that means to be, to have a narrative created about where you're from and have these things thought about you as soon as you mention the part of the world that you're from, or the religion that people in your family or yourself practice, or anything like that. And to be able to, again, make those connections between, a lot of the art that we have at Shangri-La is from places that the US has been at war with. It over time, or considers to be a quote enemy, and what does that mean to be stewards of this amazing art and culture in the middle of the Pacific, representing communities that have for many years, but especially post 9/11, been racialized and targets of hate crimes, anti-Muslim or anti-Arab or this conglomeration of all those people who look like this, who aren't even the same thing, but you know how that all goes. And so, and just like really, looking at these buckets, right? What are the buckets that we're functioning in that keeps us all pulling each other down? How do we see what the specific contexts and histories are, and how they overlap, and how they do differ, but have these through lines as well. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. And I want to toss it over to Navid, my wonderful colleague. We've been talking a lot so far, but I know you always have gems to drop. Do you have anything you want to add to what we've been talking about, or any other questions for Shah that you'd like to share?
No, just to continue what you were just discussing in terms of, the Shangri-La Museum of Islamic Art, Culture, and Design, where is our kind of voice in this conversation, and everything that you mentioned about where our collection is from, and the Islamic world, and the violence that has been ongoing there for generations, but also Shangri-La being in Hawaii, and this conversation, AAPI discussion in Hawaii is very different, like Shah was mentioning, than anywhere else, and there's a lot of nuance. So a lot of that nuance gets missed when we just generalize and look at things kind of, from a distance. And just like you said, you moved to Hawaii 3 years ago from Chicago. I've been in Hawaii for about 20 years, but same thing, I'm not from here. I'm a settler to Hawaii, but I feel like it was my responsibility to kind of unearth the stories and to learn about the history of where we are. And I think that's really important. And what Shah is doing on Turtle Island with other people and other groups, first you have to listen, you have to learn, and then you become an ally and you assist. So I think it's really important for us to be able to facilitate this conversation in any way and invite people like Punahele and Shah, especially because of the very different dynamics that the AAPI community experiences in Hawaii. And it's all because of the legacy of colonialism and the military and everything that has already been mentioned. And it creates this very strange dynamic where people from outside of Hawaii would have a hard time understanding. But I think if you put it in historic context, and that's what the most important part, I think, is to realize, this isn't brand new. And there are events that have led to the creation of this. Like you said, someone's putting these crabs in these pots, right? The crabs aren't getting in the pots themselves. So it's really important to understand the history. And the terminology that's used sometimes just doesn't fit to Hawaii. even AAPI, like Asian American Pacific Islander. In a lot of ways in Hawaii, those groups don't really fit together, outside of just being a part of the same system of colonialism that's happened over the last, 130 years or so, 140 years in the Pacific. So if anything, I think we can maybe illuminate a little bit more about the terminology, even the term Micronesian, Shah's from Palau, there's vast differences, cultural differences between different islands, different peoples, and what is considered Micronesia. It's similar to what we experience, where we're from in terms of the Middle East. The Middle East is a catch-all phrase, but it really doesn't encompass the variety of people and cultures and backgrounds that are represented by that term, which is a colonial invention, really. It's not a real geographic designation, right? So if anything, if you could speak about that a little bit, and even the hierarchy within the Micronesian community, there's so much nuance in that also, and just Oceania or Pacifica in general, this military history, the wars that have happened here, the exploitation, the nuclear testing that's occurred, and the reason why Micronesians are in Hawaii, and the resentment that exists between Hawaiians, Native Hawaiians who've had their country stolen, their culture almost eradicated, and Micronesians who've experienced very similar, genocide, basically. But now they're at odds with each other. And a lot of the comments that Shah, you were talking about, the things that you screenshotted, those were not from white Americans, right? A lot of those comments were from Asian American Pacific Islanders.
There are maybe like a handful of screenshots that actually came from white American people, but primarily it is AAPI, which is not a term I actually use normally, but it is primarily Pacific Islanders, which was probably the most hurtful thing, because you would think, at least it was my idea when I initially moved there, that because it is the Pacific, because these are cultures that are essentially cousins. These are cultures that have been tied together throughout history, whether it's through navigation or through bloodlines. These are people who are tied together, and these are the people that we find ourselves at odds with. And honestly, that really sucked. It was horrible. It's a weird feeling to have been born and raised in Oregon, and I know how to be around white supremacists. I know how to handle racism, like conventional racism. I know how to handle Portland's notorious passive-aggressive racism. I was not prepared for what happened when I moved to Hawaii for school. I didn't know what to do with it. It made me question my own identity, because I don't know how to fit into that. Because I am American, I'm Palauan American, I'm different from the Palauan students, I'm different from the Micronesian students. Nobody thinks I look like any of them. I just kind of like blend in, but then the minute I talk, everyone knows that I'm different. And it was such a strange thing. And a lot of the work that I do is talking about that. I usually refer to it as like modern Micronesian political history, where it's basically from World War II to present day. And so, excuse me, when it comes to talking about hierarchies in the Micronesian region, it's a really strange thing, because historically, these were islands that would interact with each other, they weren't necessarily islands that considered themselves a grouping. And so in the same way that AAPI basically grouped together an entire third of the planet as one people, they did that with us. And then they did that with Polynesians, and then they did that with Melanesians. And like with Palauans, where we're like our own separate branch on like the Austronesian tree, we're a mix of, like, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's Aboriginal Taiwanese and Melanesians. And so linguistically, we differ from the rest of Micronesia. And a lot of Micronesia is very similar to Polynesia in their language roots. And we're just kind of like off over here floating because apparently some people got on the canoes and went the wrong way and met up, like made a family. It was great. But it's so many different kinds of things. And even the beefs between islanders now, like within Micronesia and the stereotypes and all those different things that we encounter as Micronesians with each other, those didn't exist before until they grouped us all together and forced us to be this thing. And it's not to say that we weren't capable of it, but it wasn't on our terms. It wasn't within our cultural like practices. It's just, you guys are near each other, you're a thing. And honestly, only colonizers would think to do that to any of us, because we can all see like our differences and our similarities and how we relate to each other and what works and what doesn't, but they didn't care. And there's a group that I work with. It's a newer nonprofit called Pacifica Uprising. And one of their things, their mission statement is telling our own stories on our own terms. And I think that's one of the biggest things when it comes to this, is that the narrative has, for all of us, the narrative has not been in our hands. They've told the stories about us, and that's what gets into the mainstream, and that's what gets in people's heads, and that's what people end up knowing about us. And it's horrible, but at the same time, we're the only people who can change that. And so the work that I'm doing with this group is specifically about sharing those stories and making sure that not only people outside of our communities know, but that we understand our histories. Because this is not stuff you learn in school. You're not going to learn Micronesian history and how during the Kennedy administration, they issued a report to figure out a very specific way to get the Micronesian islands to kind of self-colonize. They had to look for a way to give them independence without giving them full independence. And so through giving them money, created a dependence, and that's why we're in the situation we're in. And that was called the Solomon Report. And a lot of people don't know about that just within the Micronesian community. And so I consider myself lucky to have been brought up by activists who were fighting US imperialism when I was growing up. And because I had that background and I know other people don't, the work that I've been doing with Pacifica Uprising is trying to make sure that we can get that information out to people. And I feel that that's kind of how it needs to be, just kind of across the board, with not just the Micronesian groups, not just Pacifica, but all the different groups that are dealing with this all across the AAPI label and beyond, is that there's no reason why we can't take back that narrative. And let me see if I can find the actual mission statement for them, because I really, really liked it. And I have been trying to read up on it. And I think as far as mission statements go, it works for lots of different groups, but it's that they're changing the narrative about Pacifica people and shifting the collective power towards sovereignty and self-determination. And that's something, again, that only we in our groups, in our communities can do. But I mean, it's not easy. It's going to be painful. People are probably going to be pretty butthurt because we've been taught our histories. Well, if we were taught our histories at all, we've been taught our histories for so long through like a colonizer's lens that there are so many people in our communities, we don't know ourselves necessarily. We don't understand where we came from. There are Pacific Islanders who don't realize that we are more than Moana and Maui. And in order for us to make this collective shift forward, like, we have to do these things, and they're gonna hurt. They're gonna suck. You have to unlearn. You have to hurt your own feelings a little. You're basically breaking up with your colonized self, and that's gonna be a lot of work, and not everyone's ready for it, but we have to do it. That's honestly, I think that's the only way for us to do it. And also, and this is a really big one that we've been talking about lately, understanding that, like, yes, there is a time and place for transactional relationships, but real allyship, actual solidarity is not rooted in transactional relationships. Like, me as a Micronesian, I went to Mauna Kea. I didn't go thinking if I do this, they'll be nicer to us. I went because it's the right thing to do. And because if my ancestors were there, they would do it because it's what you do. Like mutual aid for a lot of people, they're like, oh, this is revolutionary and amazing. No, for some of us, mutual aid is just culture. And that's what solidarity and allyship should be, is it's not transactional things. We're doing it because these are authentic relationships. These are ties we have with people. As a Micronesian, I don't want any Polynesian to treat me nicer because Papa Mao taught them things. I want them to treat us better and acknowledge us as humans because we're humans, and that's what you should do. If we keep doing this and base our solidarity in transactional relationships, honestly, we're not that far off from our oppressors because that's how they built things up with us. And so that's one of the projects that like Pacifica Uprising is working on, is trying to teach people that, yes, there is a time and place for transactional things, but our actual solidarity, our relationships with these different groups should not be rooted in that, because that does not move us forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love that idea too, where it's like, it's not mutual aid, it's just culture. That's what I've been thinking about that a lot, especially in this past year with COVID. And it's like, well, you know what? Some people have been doing this forever because there's an idea of, you know, health and wealth of a community over an individual. And I would love for you just to talk a little bit more about, like, and we asked this to Punahele too, and Navid and myself the last time around, but like, what is your ideal imaginary for the future? Like, what do you want to see? What and how do you want that this narrative that you're talking about shifting? What kind of narrative do you want to see brought to the forefront, and through what means? And also, does arts and culture play a big part of that? Because, you know, as a museum and as people who work in the arts, we're always interested in knowing how that plays a role as well. So yeah, I guess the question would just be like, what would you like to see happen, not just in Hawaii, but on the continental United States and indigenous communities everywhere? And what narratives do you want to bring to the forefront about your own community, and through what means?
My ideal world. We're the global majority. I'd like for all of us to take that back. Why is it this small group of people who don't care about us, don't care about our cultures, our histories? What is it about these people that they can do that to us? There are enough of us that we don't have to let that happen. But like you said about the planting of the seed, like, you plant the seed, it replicates, and it's really hard to extract that. And so part of that whole like breaking up with your colonized self, like, my ideal world is where we get to the point where that's normalized, where you can catch yourself being like, wait, am I looking at this authentically, or am I looking at this through like colonized lenses? And know that, and be able to like correct it. And like, we're still a long ways off from that. And I know, but that's what I want to see. Because once we get to that point, look where we are as like a modern Western culture now. From my dad's age, like boomers, to here, we're asking people's pronouns. We're asking people just little language changes like that. But I'd like to see us get to the point where we could be like, oh, no, you're not an immigrant. You're a person who's displaced because of colonization, imperialization, and militarization. And not have that look of, you're an immigrant, therefore you're the enemy, but you were displaced, we have a common enemy. And be able to work in those terms. That's like my ideal world, is where we can do that. We're connecting and we're working together, and we're understanding that our relationships are rooted in us doing the right thing for one another, because it's the right thing, and not because we're planning to get something out of it or we feel like we owe somebody. And I mean, I feel like this is basically what my whole life kind of revolves around at this point, whether it's with the work I do at IEN, or it's the work I do with Pacifica Uprising, or just the work I'm doing just, I was online and I saw something and it was interesting and I felt like I needed to uplift it because I want people to know this as well. And so that's what that looks like. And at least for me in the work with like Pacifica Uprising, it's kind of a two-pronged thing. Like, yes, we have to like tell people on the outside about what this is like and how it's impacting us, but we also have to be able to critique things in our culture that are not authentic and have no place being there. Whether it's in my community where Islamophobia and anti-Blackness exist, but obviously they couldn't exist without some sort of external influence putting them there, or just teaching them about the history so they understand why we're in the positions we are now, why so many people are leaving, why there's brain drain, why it looks like the United States keeps giving us money, but not enough is happening and changing on the islands, and not enough opportunities feel like they're there. Well, that's on purpose, so that you can't get away from them, so that you're always dependent. I'm going to give you enough money, but not so much that you can do this on your own. I mean, what's the difference between them and a really smart drug dealer? And so that's what I want to see. That's the work that I'm working towards, whether it's, again, in my day job or like what I do when I'm not in my day job, is just being able to have people make these connections within themselves and within their communities, but also with the different global indigenous communities, because there's a reason we're called the global majority. There's that many of us. And if we can get to that point, things could work out for us.
I'm with it. I hope to see that as well. I think it's always important to share our collective visions. You know, we can get bogged down in a lot of the, you know, the doldrums of the realities of situations, but we have to always think that it's been different and it can be different, you know, and we know how to do that. And I love that idea of breaking up with your colonized self. You know, that's powerful for sure. Navid, any last questions? And then I also just want to see if you have anything you'd like to ask us, Shah, like, you know, or anything else you want to bring up we haven't talked about.
Yeah, if anything, I wanted to just know a little bit more about what you've been up to the last couple of months. If you don't mind just telling us. I know it's a lot, but just give us a quick kind of synopsis, a quick recap of, you know, what's happening and what's where it's at now, and then your involvement in it, if you don't mind.
No, not at all. So I spent a month and a half in rural northern Minnesota. I have never been to the Midwest before. And so they were like, here's your plane ticket, here's your rental car, you can stay in that hotel over there, have at it. And then it started out with the Treaty People gathering, which was about 2,000 people. And all of this is kind of is around the idea of stopping Enbridge's Line 3 pipeline. They're calling it Enbridge refers to it as a replacement line, but in order for it to be a replacement, it would have to be replacing what's there versus what it's doing, which is like new spots that it's going in. It's been a very difficult fight. Just, I mean, anytime you have Indigenous communities fighting against billion-dollar industries, it's a hard fight. And so for me, I was at the Treaty People gathering, I was at the Firelight camp, and then the last several weeks I was at the Red Lake Treaty camp. They have, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but multiple river crossings. So the pipelines are under the rivers carrying oil. And in that area, wild rice is not only like a food source, but it's actually a sacred and like long held part of their culture. And having things like that under their water supply is obviously a horrible idea. And anyone who says pipelines don't leak is lying or not well read on the subject. It's been rough there, especially in the last couple of weeks. There have been direct actions. And so a lot of people have been arrested. They've weaponized the cash bail system against the water protectors, which, as we know, the cash bail system, not great already. But we've put out videos. We try to put out as much information as we can as things are happening. There was a day a couple weeks ago, I believe, where law enforcement showed up at the Red Lake Treaty Camp and assaulted and arrested people while they were in ceremony. And we had footage of that and we put it together and got it out so that people would understand. And one of the really difficult things is this is not something mainstream media wants to really cover. And so working on the like comms and media side of it, like we have the information, we put it out as much as we can, but it's a really difficult battle because it's just, you'll see it in Democracy Now!, you'll see it in Vice, but like just getting it on like mainstream network TV where like the average person is going to see it, just it doesn't ever really pan out. This morning was pretty rough. I actually like had to go and do like a whole like making sure my face was still intact because we got word that the Enbridge site that was located next to the Red Lake Treaty Camp where I was at for several weeks, they had finished the drilling and they had just pulled the pipe through. And so that was a rough one to deal with. But I mean, that's what that fight is. And I'm really proud my nephew actually made their way to the camp and was in jail for 3 days and freaked me out quite a bit. But I mean, they climbed up on the rig. They were part of shutting down construction that day. And I couldn't be more proud because a lot of the things we talked about while we were there and while we've been online talking and trying to figure out like plans is just, this is how we honor our ancestors. Because we're in the place that we're in at whatever time we're at. I was in Hawaii, I did what I could. I'm back in the Northwest right now. I was in Minnesota, but wherever it is we are, we do it not because we're trying to get something from it or because we think we owe someone. We're doing it because this is the right thing for us to do, for the people of this land. And so it's, I mean, the Line 3 fight is still going. There are days where it's wonderful and you're so like motivated and you feel like everything is just going to work out. And then there are days like today where you find out the pipe got pulled through and you're just kind of trying to hold it together. And that's just me as the media coordinator. Like I'm not Anishinaabe. I'm not from that region. I'm not from that area. And so as much as it impacts me, I cannot fathom how it must feel for them. And having to deal with that on a daily basis, knowing that this is going to get destroyed, this could get destroyed, you could be in jail. And I mean, one of the places where the camp was at, they had to deal with the fact that that is like white supremacist, neo-Nazi militia territory, and it had an armory 4 miles up the road. And it's all Indigenous women led. And that is one of the things that just, I'm not from the region. It's completely different from the Pacific. The languages are different, the foods are different, but there's something about being in the midst of the matriarchy and being around powerful women who live their cultures, that even if I'm completely from a different place, but it feels comfortable. It feels, I guess, normal. It feels like this is right and I should be there and it's okay to help. And like, that was just the feeling for me being there. And I understand now, like, that I've left and like kind of had time to think about it, is because I am rooted to my culture, because I know my history, because I was brought up within that seeing it in another community, that lets me know, like, whatever our differences are, we have too many similarities still. And I feel like that should always be a thing that people keep an eye out when you are working with other Indigenous groups, other like just BIPOC communities across the board. Like, yes, we have things that are obviously different, but one advantage we have over like colonizers and oppressors is that we do live within our cultures for the most part. We have those things. We all know we can't whistle at night. I mean, that's just things like that. It's always like, oh, okay, like we can start from here. And just understanding those and making those little connections, then you develop real relationships versus transactional ones. And once you get to that point, then like you'll feel how to take the next steps, because we have ancestors and they do that for us. So yeah, That's
beautiful.
Last couple months.
I love that too. And thank you for reminding us that although we are connected by these colonial legacies, we cannot allow that to define our connection. You know, our trauma that we've gone through because of colonialism, imperialism, etc., is not the core of why we should be in solidarity. It is one of the reasons, but it's not the reason why we should be in solidarity to begin with. It's because of our shared humanity and those seeds of shared culture and value systems that that we have to keep coming back to. So thank you for sharing about that, and we'll make sure when we share this out to send links out so people can learn more about the water protectors in the fight to stop Line 3. We really, really admire and appreciate you for doing all of that work. So thank you so much for, especially in the middle of all that, making time to speak with us as well.
Not a problem. I wish I could have done it sooner. Just that whole not always having internet thing.
Quite all right. You know, but it's definitely a worthy cause, and we totally understand. So
yes, thank you so much. When it does go out, could I get you guys to put in a link for Pacifica Uprising too?
All of it, yes.
Okay.
For sure.
Anything I'm trying to help them build their internet presence, which went from we have nothing to, okay, let's build you a website and give you all the social media things, followed by, oh crap, what do we do for your content?
Right.
And so building that now while doing all the Line 3 stuff. And it's just, I don't even remember what sleep is anymore.
Oh, well, hopefully you get a nice rest at some point soon.
Yes, definitely trying to fit in
send
naps.
You for sure rest and rejuvenation and all of the things that we need to keep going on this long road together.
Very long.
Yeah,
definitely a long road. And yes, no, crabs do not belong in buckets.
Exactly. It was such a revelation when I read that. I'm like, oh yeah, of course not. Let us, they belong. I've seen some silly crabs before in my life. Some have stolen my headphones and brought them down into their little holes before. That's
impressive.
It was impressive. They wanted to listen.
It's very impressive. But I'm just Thank you so much for this. This was awesome. It's really refreshing to get to talk about the work that I do, but actually kind of elaborate on it beyond just this is what I did. And especially trying to get the point across about transactional relationships versus authentic relationships, because it's an issue I've been having a lot lately when dealing with people. They're like, no, but you should like them because, pop them out. And I'm like, no, you should just treat us like human beings because we're human beings.
Right.
And it's very othering, and you can't build anything out of that. Yeah, I'm going to be nice to you because you gave me a slice of cake, but that's it. You gave me a slice of cake. There's nothing that ties me to you. You were the waiter. It's just not a basis for actual solidarity and allyship. That's why when I go on my tangents and rants about white saviors and clout chasing allies, and that was another issue we dealt with on the pipeline, is people who show up because there are people who show up and treat it like this is Burning Man, and people who show up because they're this is how I'm going to make my name. And it's no, don't do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, we saw it on Mauna Kea too. It's not this is new to anybody, but you can't have real solidarity and actual allies if that's what it's based in, because that's basically how the colonizers got us in the first place. You're not building something new. You're not creating something. These aren't relationships. This is a transaction.
Yeah. And if in true relationship, true partnership isn't always, you don't reap those, you don't harvest that fruit right away either. It takes
Sometimes there's no fruit.
Exactly. there's not always fruit. There doesn't have to be.
Right.
But even if there is, it's not going to just be right away.
Right.
You put care into nurturing that relationship over time, and it may be over generations, and you don't need anything in return. That's beautiful yeah. I do have to wrap this up. We could go on forever and ever, but we know we need naps and all of the things that keep us sustained and
so much more video to process.
Yeah.
We had 10 arrests and a hospitalization last night. We have a few more arrests today, and we're expecting more arrests tonight. So like, in theory, we sleep, but I'm like checking my phone every few minutes, like,
right.
No more rest, right? Yeah. So,
well, thank you so much.
Thank you both so much. This was awesome. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Really
thank you.
Thank you for your voice and everything you do.
Thank you. And for both of you as well.
Yeah, this is wonderful. And we appreciate Quiet Before, everyone on Shangri-La who's helped us put this together. And, Punahele again, who will be able to weave these two kind of parts together and see how great you all complement each other, and hopefully get everyone in the same Zoom room one day too. And
yes, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we'll make it happen. And thank you so much to Nancy and the whole team. And yeah, be well and safe and healthy, and continued solidarity with all of the struggles. So
yes, real solidarity.
The real
kind. Solidarity.
The real kind. Keep us posted on everything you're working on.